Greetings, my name is Saleem Ali. I am a member of the United Nations International Resource Panel, and I'm also the chair of the Department of Geography and Spatial Sciences at the University of Delaware in the United States. Thanks to all of the contributing authors and the Secretariat of UNEP in Paris who helped coordinate this report. We approached this issue from two key policy interventions, looking at preventative policies to address resource degradation at points of origin, and also focusing on trapped populations in locations of natural resource stress. There, we also had two subcategories focusing on adaptation at destination points, as well as integration of migrants into sustainable management of resources, both at origin and destination. So we've followed a mixed method approach for this report, recognizing that this is a very sensitive topic and we do not want to have a linear causal pathway for migration that has been used previously in many quantitative analysis. We do use econometrics and geospatial analyses, but we couple them with qualitative interviews and detailed network analysis, looking at the nuances of the decision to migrate. We're also very conscious of not blaming migrants for these decisions, recognizing many are coming from conflict zones, and recognizing also that multiple causality is often very difficult to differentiate in the decision to migrate. We've tried not to reinvent the wheel, so prior work that has been done on sea level rise, for example, through the World Bank's groundswell report, is taken into account, and we have focused instead on specific policies that may have a direct resource nexus, such as managed retreat. So zooming through some 10 key messages of the report. First, we've evidenced that migration and resources form an adaptive, complex nexus, which is not linear and it operates in both directions. Second, the most direct connection between resources and human mobility is around hydropower. There's a clear linkage between forced displacement in many cases and voluntary migration around hydropower projects. We also did a geospatial analysis of refugee camps and found that while there is some stress on them in terms of natural resources and availability, in many cases the refugees are adding value through subsistence farming in those locations. We also looked at mineral rushes, which can lead to high level of internal migration, but they can reduce an incentive for external or international migration. The linkage between migration and drought is complex. We used analysis in Africa with geospatial techniques and econometrics to consider how the decision to migrate is influenced by income, and found that income is an extremely important modulating factor, which would lead to potential for trapped populations, as well as the decision to migrate internally versus externally. Sixth, soil carbon was not found to be a significant impact on migration decisions or in terms of the way in which migration patterns are evidenced overall. We found that systems mapping is a very effective policy analysis tool which can help to identify trigger points and visualize them for policymakers. And we use this specifically in one of the chapters of our assessment to exemplify how it can be used. We also suggest that adaptive resilience in stationary populations should be prioritized first as a policy intervention, rather than trying to have a very detailed analysis of what would be needed for mitigation, because we found that adaptive resilience has a much wider spectrum and much faster ability for action in that regard. Land ownership and tenure over resources can certainly mitigate forced migration. That evidence was quite clear, but it also allows for greater opportunity for voluntary mobility in many cases because it provides a capital base. We finally found that remittances of migrants can be one of the very important ways in which we can leverage natural resource restoration efforts with migration. And there are policy interventions like green remittance bonds which can be used in this regard. The report also has some very concrete policy examples, such as these, which are provided at the end of the report, and we look forward to further engagement with all the stakeholders represented at this dialogue.